everybody. Thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View, Ladies Tea. Tonight, we're joined by Breitbart politics editor Emma Jo Morris. Welcome back, Emma Jo, and host of Unapologetic Live for PragerU, Amala Ekpunobi. Amala and Emma Jo, you two are a couple of my favorites to get on. I feel like we just cut through all of it, and we're just giving people the straight information. And I think we need to start today by talking about this situation with a children's choir who was at the U.S. Capitol. They were apparently approved to sing at the Capitol, and they were stopped when they were in Statuary Hall singing nothing other than the national anthem by some of the security there. They were told, apparently, that it was considered a form of demonstration, or it might have offended someone. Amala, I can't think of, quite frankly, a better spot to sing our national anthem, something that's representative of every American, than in Statuary Hall at the United States Capitol. And yet these children of this children's choir from Rushing Brook apparently were stopped. What do you make of all of that?
You know, I would like to say that I'm shocked to see a video like this, and it is a very devastating video to watch because you're watching these kids and they're so excited to be there. They've clearly practiced this, and the confused face that they all get when they are stopped from singing the national anthem in a place like the U.S. Capitol is just astounding to me. But like I said, I'm not shocked that people view this as a form of protest. It seems to have become a one-sided issue that people actually care about this country. They care about the flag. They care about our national anthem. And they care to proclaim that sort of reverence that they have for American history and this nation in a place like the U.S. Capitol. So now they've been stopped. I think it's absolutely ridiculous to me. We should be cheering on these young children who have decided to take on this tradition and do so in a place like the U.S. Capitol.
Yeah, Emma Jo, I feel like, gosh, do we ever need more kind of unity, something that we can all get behind, like our national anthem, something that is supposed to be representative of every American, that should be something we all want to gather behind and sing. It kind of feels like they were denied their freedom of speech in some respects. I know that they are not finished with this whole business, that this group is actually pushing forward, and they're saying, wait a minute, we could have a lawsuit of some variety here, that there might be more to what happened to us. And Kevin McCarthy, I believe, has invited them back to sing, but it does kind of become a concerning thing. I think Amala's right. We're not surprised when we hear things like this happen, because at this point, if you show any pride in your country, you're some sort of a horrible person, and it's okay to knock America. It's okay to burn our flag. It's okay to just trash our entire country to a lot of folks out there. But I think it is a very sad commentary as to where we are in a country right now, like the United States, that this sort of thing could happen. And it truly feels like just another step of denying people some of our fundamental rights as American citizens.
Oh, totally. And to me, like, I mean, I don't think it was, I don't think that necessarily the Capitol Police looked at these kids and they were like, we're going to need to shut this down. Like, this is offending me. I don't think that that's what it was. In fact, it's kind of like the opposite, which is maybe sort of similar, but it's I was given a rule and I am applying the rule with absolutely zero skepticism and absolutely zero common sense. And you see that a lot, especially lately in policing, where every wrong move is going to be caught on camera, or somebody's going to get in trouble, or somebody is going to get sued. And when you operate on that premise, you all of a sudden become highly paranoid and almost like a bot, because you're just trying to follow the rules to the letter. So, in this circumstance, like the justification for breaking this obviously harmless thing up was that you can't protest, and that this is like, some sort of protest, or obviously it wasn't, but they have a certain description of what a protest is. They have a certain,
it's kids singing the national anthem, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, and it'll check some of those things, and they think that something is going to get caught on tape. Some activist is going to be in the hall. All of a sudden, I'm going to be ensnared in some scandal. They try to pivot, to follow the rules exactly because they don't want to be involved in a scandal. And lo and behold, we're involved in a scandal. There's something kind of South Park flavor to it. You know what I mean? But I think that it's really just a result of paranoia and being obviously, a joyless stickler.
Yeah, there's a lot of joyless sticklers out there. By the way, it makes me think about how devoted people were to following like the mask rules during COVID, right? Like there was no room for critical thought. There was no ability of so many people to be like, wait a minute, let me look at this reasonably. Let me just kind of break down the facts and the information and what we do know. There were so many people, and by the way, they're still out there with their masks on. And I mean, it's mind-boggling at this point. But yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe people are just like so conditioned to operate in this little box that is given to all of us that this is the result, is that these poor kids, this kids choir who, they practiced it. They were excited. I remember I took a class trip to Washington, D.C. in like 6th grade, and it was so cool and so exciting. And here, this was the result of it. It's very sad, obviously.
Worse when it's police, by the way, that are doing it. And we've I'm sure during COVID, you've had 1,000 of these interactions where, you know that the person's just trying to do their job, but what they're hectoring you about and pestering you about is obviously ridiculous. And you get into this position where people start to feel like the cops are abusing power a little bit. And that is not good because, obviously, we're all advocating for police and police protection and their right to do their jobs and all of that. But then you have these circumstances where police are obviously being overzealous, but it's because they're following the rule book, because they're getting slammed for being overzealous. And it creates this horrible position that they get put in where they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And it's like, obviously this is dumb, but I'm imagining the guy who was in this position thinking, well, I just have to do my job and I have to do it exactly to the letter. Otherwise I'm going to get nailed for something.
Yeah. What a shame. What just a dumb situation we're in America. Another thing that's a real shame, but again, not surprising to so many of us. We know that social media like Twitter and Facebook have been very biased against liberals for a long time. But a recent study came out, this research psychologist says that perhaps the biggest issue when it comes to big tech might be Google. Google manipulates search results. We know that they manipulate our news feed. They even go so far as when you're watching like a YouTube video and it comes up with the up next. This is the interesting thing to me was that 76% of the up next suggestions for adults leaned liberal. When it comes to kids, Amala, 96% of what is produced for the kid, and if you're watching a kid's video, the up next is going to lean liberal. I mean, think about how that impacts an entire generation. The New York Post has suggested that there were so many manipulations of search results via Google during the 2020 election that it actually swung somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 million votes for Joe Biden and away from Donald Trump. This is, Amala, though, why I don't even use Google anymore. I use the web browser DuckDuckGo, and anything that I want to search and actually get maybe a little less biased results for, I'm putting it in there. Do you use Google?
I do. I use a little bit of Google, a little bit of DuckDuckGo. I'm all over the place in where I search for information. And one of the reasons that I've become particularly, I guess, cynical when it comes to the use of search engines at large is that I think people underestimate the amount of power that these search engines have in really creating the life that you things that you think, what it is that you see. And Google is particularly sinister in the way that they do it. When you go to your Google homepage, you will see a completely blank white screen with the Google logo. And they did that to really convince people that they are an impartial space, that you'll enter Google, you'll type in your search results, and you will get the exact answer that you're looking for. But it's actually been found in studying and research done at Google and for Google that they can put in an indetectable amount of bias in your search results, meaning you will never be able to notice that they are quite literally putting together what it is you see, you think, and you feel. And of course, they can do so in minor ways, like with consumerism journalism and the products that you buy. But when you talk about something like an election, they have immense power. And of course, they're going to use this in tandem with entities like Instagram and Facebook, and we hope not Twitter anymore, but they could have at Twitter as well, and completely shift and change what it is we're thinking on any given day.
Yeah, I mean, Emma Jo, all you got to do is Google my name and tell me what comes up. I will guarantee you with almost 100% certainty that the first like 6 things that come up for me, the first page of results you get will all be negative. One of them being my Wikipedia page, which, I mean, you would think that I'm just out there, you know, getting my hands on any puppy or baby I could and just killing them based on the results that you'll come up with. It's crazy. But it is very frustrating. And I think the concern for so many of us, obviously the election interference concern of things, but people are getting bad information out there. They're not getting the full picture. They're not really getting a full breadth of results here, but they don't even know that. People really believe that this is the top information that you can generate if you Google something. If you Google Lara Trump, this is who she is. It's really frightening.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you like wash the blood off your shirt before you kick into pod. But yeah, that's the thing. It's you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And Google is very aware of that, right? So they have this kind of clever little trick where they play on that because normal people who live normal lives don't spend the day like we do, you know, scouring the internet and reading every single outlet on the same story to piece together, you know, everything going on. And the omission, you know, through the omission of each site, you can kind of get a full-ish, you know, picture of what's going on. But more people more people do not do that. And they go on Google, right? Like, let's say you want to know about Jordan Neely. Okay. You go on Google and you type in Jordan Neely death. And the first 3 pages are all mainstream media. And this is something that Breitbart is acutely aware of. And the reason for Breitbart's existence is to fill in that space, that void that is left by the omission of the mainstream media. But Google has this very clever thing that they do where they look for keywords, right? It's SEO. So they look for keywords and they call it relevance. And then they also have obviously a blacklist of sites that most of conservative media is probably on, although actually the New York Post has gotten pretty good at that, where they try to basically downrank your content.
Like NewsGuard, right?
For the guise of truth, right, and reliability, but really what are they doing? It's obviously totally ideological. Listen, I think if you look up Helen Keller on Google, you'll probably find a pretty good summary of her life and accomplishments. But once you're looking up Jordan Neely, that is a very different circumstance. And this is something that we learned from the Twitter files, which no doubt is prevalent and present in all of Silicon Valley, where these people have some sort of savior complex. And they think that their ideology is not only Bible, but it's moral. And in order to upkeep a moral society, they have to essentially brainwash their users. And in the case of Twitter, that's users of outsized influence. You know, you have every editor in America getting their angles from Twitter. But Google is definitely more important because forget influence, like this is the go-to search engine for vast swaths of the public. Obviously, most of the public, they don't know about this because, again, like I said at the beginning, you don't know what you don't know, and Google is very subtle.
It's so scary. Amala, just really quickly, what Emma Jo was just talking about reminded me a lot of what NewsGuard does. And I know that Marissa Streit has come on my show before and talked about NewsGuard, but maybe you could just give us a brief synopsis quickly. NewsGuard is an entity that basically does what Emma Jo just said, right? It ranks the outlets, the news outlets, and these sorts of things that it deems to be either, you know, newsworthy, or I guess it ranks it like 0 to 100. And if you lean conservative in any way and they disagree with you, your rank goes down. You lose like sponsorships. Tell people a little bit about that if you could.
Yeah, so if you are a user who wants to go to a supposed authority on what websites are credible or going to give you the correct information, you can download this NewsGuard add-on onto your browser. And as you search to different websites, it will give you NewsGuard's score on the credibility of that website. Now, if you go to a place like PragerU or the Daily Wire, or you go to watch the Right View, you'll find a big red mark that pops up, and NewsGuard will say that this site is not credible. You should not listen to this information. They have been known to spread misinformation and to spread lies, and essentially warns the person who should be able to take in that information, use their own critical thinking skills to deduce whether or not it is objective or subjective, and it tells them, do not go to this site. So you have unknowing people who are downloading this add-on thinking, oh, well, this is going to shave some time off my internet search. I'm not going to have to do the hard work of trying to figure out whether or not this information is truthful. And it injects their bias into your browser.
Yeah, I mean, this is crazy stuff. You were talking a little bit, Emma Jo, about Twitter, about people feeling like they need to be our saviors. Well, we know that happened. Thank goodness we have Elon Musk over there now. But James O'Keefe of Project Veritas originally came out recently that Twitter was censoring his reporting at the direction of the Department of Homeland Security just prior to Elon Musk taking over Twitter. Why the Department of Homeland Security is trying to censor James O'Keefe and Project Veritas, that I'd like to hear a little more about that. But get this, the responsible Twitter employee has since, according to Elon Musk, left Twitter, and guess where they went? This person went to Google. So a person who was trying to stop someone from exposing the truth, from bringing more transparency to our country, to our world, more information to people, now went over to Google. So it's no wonder that this sort of thing continues to happen. Emma Jo, this person is over at Google now.
Yeah, there's this really incestuous, disgusting relationship between the government and social media companies. And again, this is something that we learned from the Twitter files, but we already kind of knew and was definitely really that was blown up during the laptop from hell saga, right? Which is actually what kind of prompted Elon Musk to buy Twitter in the first place, actually, right. The genesis of the idea. Because you had the witch's brew of feds controlling journalism and the proliferation of journalism online. And this is not only happening at Twitter. We know that it's not only happening at Twitter. Mark Zuckerberg said it on the Joe Rogan Experience as well, that he was being primed by the FBI for this. But what we learned really the details of it in the Twitter files, and God knows what else is out there, because this James O'Keefe thing and Homeland Security, that's a new agency that's being thrown into the mix. But they taught us how they did it, right? Which was they come to these guys, they give them security clearance, they have a group chat, they're so close, everyone's so close, and it's this unholy, disgusting alliance between the government and masters of our communication. And keep in mind too, this isn't, I think it's naive to say that this is only about content that's actually online. We know that these guys have access to DMs. This is a violation of the First Amendment, of the Fourth Amendment, of the Fifth Amendment. This is repulsive. And this doesn't surprise me because we were all there and we all watched this whole saga over the last 3 years, starting with the New York Post, and before that, honestly, why does John Brennan have a job at MSNBC? Oh. Why does James Clapper have a job at CNN? What is that? Why would we have spies working at news corporations? It's all the same flavor, and it's all the same thing, where the government has decided that they don't have the right to outright ban speech. So what did they do? They kind of found a loophole where they found willing participants in the tech companies and in the, for that matter, cable companies, who are willing to take on that burden for them. And they work in tandem. I mean, that's it. There was a constant stream from the FBI and some other there was another agency, but it was mainly the FBI, and the CIA was involved as well, where there was this constant stream of emails coming into Twitter, where these people's full-time jobs were to literally comb through conservative accounts, basically large and small, and be reported for quote unquote disinformation, decided by who? Spies.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, remember when we were about to have the disinformation czar? Remember that?
Oh yeah,
nonsense.
NewsGuard, on the topic of NewsGuard and all of this, who is the big shot at NewsGuard? It's Michael Hayden, former CIA guy.
It's amazing. It is very incestuous and very frightening. And it kind of feels every day to me like we are just steps behind China in so much of this. I mean, there are a lot of people, ladies, who don't see it. There are a lot of people who just go about their day. They don't really care. They don't think about it. But they ought to start thinking about it, because every day that we allow this sort of thing to happen is a day closer we become to a country we're not going to recognize pretty soon. We just had the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square situation, and China does this thing. Apparently, they start ramping up massive online censorship just ahead of this anniversary every year, because in case people don't know, it is illegal in China to commemorate or discuss Tiananmen Square in any way. The government went so far in China that they actually, on a digital map, erased a bridge completely. And why did they do that? It's called the Sitong Bridge. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And it became a big political topic last year when a man started hanging these banners off of this bridge, basically criticizing President Xi and his leadership, or I guess whatever you want to call it, during COVID. And it started sparking protests because he was hanging these banners. Now, they don't want any protests in China. They don't want anybody talking about Tiananmen Square. It was a pretty bad look for them, if people recall. This guy, by the way, who started hanging the signs off the bridge, got arrested. No one knows what happened to him. And I'll leave everybody to kind of figure out what ultimately ended up happening. But these are the sort of things, if we are not careful here in the United States of America, who's to say that somebody's not going to be like, well, wait a minute, this could cause some sort of pushback from the general population. We better censor this online. We better suppress this. We better not let people talk about this. I don't know, Amala. I mean, I know it sounds crazy to some people, but these are the things we need to start talking about and learning about and listening to, because if we're not careful, we're just going to end up getting everything censored like this because of having things like disinformation czars potentially.
You're absolutely right. I think that slippery slope most definitely exists, and it is scary, I think, that one, people are not concerned about it, or two, that people are pro-censorship when it is to the end of their own ideology and their own agenda. They are fully willing to bow down to the overlords at big tech and in the US government who are allowing this to happen, even though we have people screaming from the rooftops that this is not okay. And like you said, China is the place to look if you want to see what the logical conclusion to some of these policies and actions is. A major form of protest in China during the COVID lockdowns was actually people walking around carrying blank sheets of paper. That was their form of protest. And a lot of people saw these pictures and said, why? Because they didn't feel comfortable using their words, saying things out loud. They didn't feel comfortable even having a direct message written on these pieces of paper because of how brutal the Chinese government actually is when it comes to protest in their country. So that's what we have to look forward to if we do not stand up for ourselves, stand up for our freedom of speech. And that includes defending things like, yes, young children singing the national anthem in the US Capitol. And people might not realize it. They'll think it's a silly story. But again, this is where these things go.
Yeah. The reason I think you're right, that they carried around these white pieces of paper, and people saw all these pictures of folks, I believe in like Hong Kong, holding up the pieces of paper. And it's because they said, well, they can't arrest us if we don't have something written, if we don't have a message written on the paper. It's just a piece of paper, Emma Jo, that we're holding up. It's crazy because when you talk to people who used to live in China, there were groups of people who moved from like Hong Kong to Taiwan. And although they supposedly are going to feel safer in Taiwan and freer in Taiwan, they still say that they feel like they have an invisible jail in their minds because they have been so conditioned to think a certain way and respond a certain way that they can't actually freely, speak or do certain things. And I started thinking, I mean, maybe it's a leap, but I started thinking about the way that we're already censoring ourselves here in America. There are so many places that people like just won't go. You just won't talk about things because it makes some people uncomfortable, and that might not be nice. We need to be talking about all these things. I'm kind of worried that we look down the line like 30 years and we're going to have citizens in the United States saying, I'm just, I kind of feel like my mind is still in jail. I can't talk about these things. I feel like it's already starting to happen here in some crazy ways.
Well, that's it. And like, that's kind of what I was thinking, like, when you opened this part of the segment, I was thinking, I don't know, cops coming to the door like they do in China over speech. I don't know about that. But then I was thinking, it's not that you don't need that. You don't, and I see that all the time because I live in Brooklyn and I'm obviously editor of Breitbart. Anybody who knows me knows what's up. And so, I don't even have to say anything.
Yeah.
But it's not that I'm censoring myself. It's that my reputation precedes me. But, it's like I get people all the time coming to me and being like, super low, super quiet, whisper, writing it on a sheet of paper and then crumpling it up. I don't know how I feel about this pronoun stuff. I don't know how I feel about this like environment stuff, or I don't know about the COVID stuff. And people will say it's so low. And like, that's the stuff that I do think is happening here. I don't think it's like cops knocking on your door and saying, oh, you didn't say, I didn't like what you said about the regime. I don't think that that's where we're going necessarily. I mean, maybe there's a universe, but there's a universe where a lot of things could happen. I think it's more something like people are worried again, like, it's similar to like the cop situation where they're so terrified of being canceled. They're so terrified of being fired, of being ejected from their friend group, of rocking the boat in their marriage, that they just censor themselves. And then they get into this really awkward kind of closeted place where they're constantly lying or constantly withholding information or withholding what they have to say because they're just so uncomfortable with the way that they might make people feel. And that is censorship. That's the worst censorship.
Yeah.
You're a prisoner yourself.
Right. Like self-censoring. People did this, by the way, to me. I mean, they've done it. They do it all the time still. People will come up to me on an airplane and just be like, we love your father-in-law. And I'm like, oh, thank you. I mean, I'm good with that because I'm not trying to get blown up on an airplane. Like everybody come like, oh, who's here? What are we talking about? That's fine with me. But people did this in the 2016 election. Don't forget, they actually lied after they went and voted to the exit pollsters because they didn't want anyone to know that they had voted for Donald Trump. This is the kind of like crazy space we're living in, that if they would go so far as to lie about the person for whom they voted because they didn't want the association. I mean, that kind of like self-censorship, I just think is really terrifying. And then, I mean, I'm always worried about China. I feel like I talk about China all the time, but I feel like we really need to keep our eye on China, especially there was this report recently, another one came out, the US government has given somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.3 billion to Chinese and Russian entities for research programs. They paid $1.6 million to Chinese food producers. This is in tandem with us losing somewhere around 10,000 farms here in the United States last year alone. And guess who's stepping in with all this extra money to buy these farms? It's a lot of Chinese people, a lot of Chinese companies are stepping in to buy these. Amala, I know people have kind of mentioned this before about China buying our land and buying our farms and that sort of thing. That doesn't feel very comfortable to a lot of people, and I think rightly so. We're not allowed, by the way, as Americans, you can't go to China and like buy up some giant farm like that. I don't think they allow Americans to do that sort of thing, but we're allowing it here in the United States.
Right. I think everything that supposedly America hates, Chinese is indulging in, and we are helping them do that, which is very interesting. I think there's three fronts that we sort of have this looming threat of China, and that's militarily, where they are strengthening. The U.S. just found secret Chinese police forces all across the United States, and that was a massive story. Economically, they're buying up farmland not only in the U.S. and Canada and Australia, they're buying up large pieces of Africa as well. So that's going to be something we have to deal with. And then you have ideologically, the Chinese are very nationalist. They support their country in every way they can. If you compare the social media usage in China to what we have here in the United States, even though the Chinese have large ownership of our social media platforms, the sort of healthy behavior that they have in their country in regard to social media is nothing like we have here. And it's hard for me to believe that they are not pumping in their own ideological thoughts or ends towards the United States, and then leaving all of that quite frankly, bullshit out of their own country for their own children and their own young people. So those three fronts, I mean, the military, the economy, and our own ideology in our minds, they are a looming threat and will continue to be one until there's something done about it.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of my parents have this woman who lives down the street from them. She's lovely. Her name is Nita. And apparently my dad tells me that she'll do like a kind of like once over of her pantry like once a week. And anything that's like junky or super sweet, she like takes over to my parents' house to give them. That's what's happening with China. They're just dumping all the garbage over here with us in America. And then they're clean. Everything's good over there. They're educating their kids. Their kids are getting, you know, instead of on TikTok, they're twerking. They're like teaching them to play the cello or something. It's things that are actually useful and beneficial for the future. It seems like there's a similar thing happening in my parents' neighborhood, by the way. I know we're running out of time, but I really want to ask you both about this guy, 45-year-old guy named Brian Johnson, spends $2 million a year in a quest for eternal youth. 80 vitamins a day, Emma Jo, eats 70 pounds of pureed vegetables a month, goes to bed, this is the problem for me, at 8:30 at night, got blood plasma transfusions from his 17-year-old son. Some people kind of think of him a little like Patrick Bateman from American Psycho, a little bit, a little intense, a little crazy. I love the idea of doing something that's going to keep me young forever. It's going to be impossible for me to go to bed at 8:30. I don't know. What would you do any of these things in order to stay youthful?
Yeah, like my youth is probably, I hate to admit it, but up there on something that I probably think about every day. And I could see like this regimen being something like that picks up on Park Avenue and stuff. But, you know, these things, I feel like we're reading about this all the time, you know, like there was like these stories about how all these tech bros are trying to figure this out as well, you know, how to maintain youth and eternal youth and immortality and whatever. And it just makes me think of like a Tower of Babel type situation, you know what I mean? Like where, I don't know if that's too deep cuts for this audience, but, you know, where we're trying to reach this kind of like heavenly status and we're trying to reach this God status and you can have it all figured out until you don't. And that's kind of like what it makes me think of. And I know that there's some shows, and I've spoken to some of these people who are on these shows and doing these stories, transhumanism and whatever. And yes, I'm sure that that's real and people are exploring it. And I've heard that there's a huge amount of investment that's going into this. But I just see it as this thing where man's striving to be God, and it never works. It just never works. And it's not the first time that we've tried to do that. And people will say, well, the technology is different now than it was. And it's like, yeah, the Tower of Babel thought that their technology was new too. I just can't see it. I just can't see it. It seems silly. I mean, I'll eat vegetables and get plasma transfusions from my niece, I guess, if that'll help with my wrinkles. But I don't know achieving immortality.
Well, but like at some point, Amala, to me, some of this is like, are you even living if this is how you are living? This guy eats exactly 1,977 calories every single day. He cannot deviate away from this. The person who did this interview on the Daily Mail asked him, don't you ever think like sometimes about just having like a juicy burger or just like I think they used cheeky glass of wine. That must have been a British person interviewing him. And he was like, no, those things disgust me. And I'm like, real? Like, I'm sorry, but sometimes I really look forward to just sitting down and having a glass of wine. If this is how you are regimenting your life, though, I agree with you, Emma Jo. I'm all about it. Like, give me the fountain of youth if we found it. But you got to also live to some extent. I don't know.
Right. This is exactly what I was thinking when reading this whole story. It seems like he's dedicated his entire life to this end, I guess, or lack thereof of an end.
Yeah.
He's just trying to escape. And in order to do that, you have to be totally regimented. He said he never deviates from his regimen on any given day. He's constantly being poked and prodded and getting facial treatments and all of this and that. To me, it is not living whatsoever. And I fear that he's not going to get what he's looking for. I think death is a human experience that we are all going to share. And I think one of the major reasons that he also looks so amazing for being 45 is that he has $800 billion. You know, a lot of people say that thing, you're not ugly, you're just poor. That's what I feel is going on here.
I'm sure it helps. I'm sure that's a helpful thing to have. Well, look, he has recently recruited a woman to be like his counterpart in this trial. I don't know how long this lasts. I guess forever for him. But there's some woman who's doing it with him as well now. So I'm sorry, ladies. I know that you wanted to get involved and be part of this, but I guess they already found their person. Yeah, I know. Last thing before we go, I feel like air travel is just terrible. I talk about it all the time. There's a list of the airlines that you should avoid flying at all costs, and I quote that. The number one, this was not a shocker for me, Spirit Airlines. I don't know. Have you both flown Spirit? Because I haven't flown Spirit in years. It was a horrible experience. A couple times I did.
Oh yeah, that you said Spirit and I got triggered. I'm actually for my like very loyal Twitter followers, they know like every time I go to an airline, it's like go to an airport, it's like about to be like hell is about to break loose on my timeline because every single time there's something and every single time I'm rage tweeting every 30 seconds of it. And one of my lines once was I would rather fly Air Pyongyang than Air Canada.
Oh my God.
Airlines actually follows me on Twitter because like I guess that's like some sort of anticipation of the blow up or like they can follow up along. I've had many incidents. I am very vocal online about my opinions and they're never good. They're all the worst. Spirit though has a special place in my shit list.
It's not the best. Apparently, Amala, the list goes down. Allegiant, American, which I was kind of surprised about. American is the third, one to avoid at all costs. Frontier, then Delta, and then under that JetBlue. I usually kind of gravitate towards JetBlue because I feel like it's sort of like you know what you're getting there. There's no first class, so there's not that whole thing. If you can get towards the front or you get the extra legroom seats, that's great for my kids. There's like a TV in front of them. I don't know. How do you feel about any? Are there any airlines you've had like a terrible experience on? Pretty much all of them these days, though, right?
You know what? I feel like there's a lot of bias here because you can have one bad experience on one flight and you're never going to go with that airline ever again. I had one JetBlue flight that was delayed by like 6 hours and I swear I'm never going to JetBlue ever again.
Yeah.
I also have a personal vendetta against Southwest just for the way that they do their seating and the fact that you cannot have an assigned seat on their planes. So I'm over that. I will say though, Spirit gets the worst rep and I feel like it is the Waffle House of airlines. You might witness a flight on your plane, but it is the one airline company that has not had a plane crash I've read. So
is that right?
Yeah, I guess so. So it's trade-offs. It's moves and counter moves, I guess.
You really do know what you're getting with Spirit. Like the ticket is cheap, but then literally everything is added on. Like if you actually want to walk onto the plane, that's like an extra $5. They just like add everything on at that point. And you kind of know what you're getting, but Amala, if the planes are staying in the air, that is something to consider. Although for me, the only thing I care about, I look based on like my time frame. You know, if I'm flying with my kids, there's a certain window of time I got to get places. Otherwise, the ship's going down quickly. Or, depending on my schedule. And then you try to find like the best option there whenever I will say I never choose Spirit. Sometimes it'll be the best timing. I'm like, no, I don't think so.
I won't either.
Not for
all
me.
The way.
Okay. All right. I love it. Well, Emma, Joe, and Amala, thank you both for being here on Ladies Tea at The Right View. We appreciate you as always. To everybody at home, please like, subscribe, share, and follow. We'll see you back here next time for more of The Right View. So I'm like a lot of people. I love to wear an Apple Watch, but I hate how it looks. And I scoured the internet to search for the best looking Apple Watch cases I could find, and I found it. goldandcherry.com. They have absolutely beautiful watches, as you can see here. Everything is waterproof. Everything looks good with different outfits. You can get sporty, you can get fancy, but they are great quality, made out of Delaware in the United States of America. And they have been kind enough to give me a promo code that I can share with you if you want to get your hands on one of these as well. It's Lara T, Larat is the promo code to get yourself a discount. at goldandcherry.com. And not only do they make Apple Watch cases, they also make great products for iPads and iPhones, keyboards, your desktop, everything you could possibly need. Goldandcherry.com. Use promo code LARAT so you can get yourself one of these today too. At The Right View, we're very proud of the fact that we are independent. We get to say everything that we think and everything that we feel. We have no woke companies guiding us or telling us what we can and cannot say. We are always going to shoot you straight and give you the facts as we know them. And that's why it's important to support independent outlets like The Right View. My name is Lara Trump, and I think Mike Lindell is a patriot. He is someone who loves this country, is willing to fight for this country. I love MyPillow because not only are MyPillows made in the USA by American workers, but they're great products, and they're so great that not only do I use them in my own bed at night, my children actually requested. My daughter the other day went to the closet and pulled out a MyPillow and said, "This is the pillow that I want to sleep with." And I gotta tell you, she loves it and will have nothing to do with any other pillow. So it's a big hit around our house. My dogs also happen to sleep on MyPillow dog beds. So all around the Trump household, we're big fans. If you go to mypillow.com today and use promo code Trump, again, promo code Trump, you will not only save money, but you will help us continue this show and other shows like it and help us continue the fight for the future of America. Inflation has impacted all of our lives. I don't think anyone can go to the gas pump or the grocery store without noticing that it is a major factor. And unfortunately, it's not going anywhere. It doesn't seem like it's going down in the way that we would like it to. And one way to protect your money is by investing in precious metals, gold and silver. That's always been a great way to make sure that you keep your money and you keep it safe. When you go to bh-pm.com, use promo code Trump. That way, if you decide you want to invest in gold and silver, you'll save yourself a little bit of money. We live in a time that's very interesting. A lot of us out there feel like a lot of our rights are slipping away. And if you're like I am and you want to have the right to choose whether or not to have a vaccine, how to live your life freely, and you're looking for a great doctor, I've heard amazing things about Dr. Sherwood. He's somebody who you should really check out and check into, and it'll help support this program and keep us going. So go to sherwood.tv and use promo code Trump. Again, sherwood.tv and use promo code Trump. You can save yourself some money and help us keep our program going.